Guns N' Roses could have been the biggest band in the world. And the reason they're not is because of Axl Rose.
Gene Simmons, the legendary bassist of Kiss, is as famous for his controversial opinions as he is for his music. He's never been one to hold back, especially when it comes to other musicians. And now, after years of making strong statements and engaging in heated discussions, Gene Simmons has now revealed the names of 9 artists he disliked at various points in his career. At number 9 on the list is Ronnie James Dio, the heavy metal legend who popularized the iconic devil horns hand gesture that became synonymous with rock culture. Their feud wasn't about music. It went far beyond a typical rivalry. Their conflict started over the famous devil horns hand gesture that every rock fan knows. The real drama started in 2017 when Simmons did something that shocked the entire rock community. He tried to trademark the devil horns gesture for himself. This was the very gesture Dio had made famous decades earlier, turning it into a beloved symbol for metalheads everywhere. Dio brought that gesture to rock and roll from his Italian grandmother, who used it to ward off evil. But Simmons claimed he was the one who used it first. Way back on a 1977 Kiss album cover, his plan was simple. If any musician used the devil horns gesture in their performances, they would have to pay him money. The rock world saw it as an act of pure greed, an attempt to cash in on something that belonged to everyone. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Dio's widow, Wendy, immediately called the move disgusting, saying Simmons had made a complete fool of himself. Even while Dio was alive, he called out Simmons for this kind of behavior. In a famous interview, he joked, "Gene Simmons will tell you that he invented it, but then again, Gene invented breathing and shoes and everything." It was the perfect jab, capturing exactly how people felt about Simmons' reputation for taking credit for everything. Under all that pressure, Simmons eventually abandoned the trademark, but the damage to his reputation was already done. Coming in at number 8 on our list is Axl Rose. Another frequent target of Gene Simmons' public criticism, Gene Simmons has often spoken about his frustration with Axl Rose. He believes Rose was the reason Guns N' Roses didn't become the biggest band in the world. According to Simmons, it was Rose's personal demons and lack of professionalism that stopped the band from achieving legendary status. Simmons specifically pointed to Rose's well-documented struggles with and alcohol. Simmons often compares a music career to a marathon, saying it requires discipline and constant effort, a staying power he feels Axl Rose simply didn't have. But Simmons took his criticism to a shocking new level when he said a young Axl Rose needed a good beating. He tried to justify the comment, explaining that everyone needs a firm hand to guide them away from mistakes. The comment was seen as deeply insensitive, given Rose's famously abusive childhood, but Simmons reportedly stood by it. Now, despite all this harsh criticism, Simmons does recognize Axl's immense talent. In 2018, he spoke positively about Rose singing with AC/DC, calling it fantastic. However, these positive comments didn't change Simmons' long-held disappointment that Rose's personal problems overshadowed Guns N' Roses' chance for lasting success. Next up at number 7, we have a name that will be very familiar to Kiss fans, original guitarist Ace Frehley. The feud between Gene and Ace is perhaps the most famous of all, stemming from decades of both personal and professional conflict. It's a bitter fight that destroyed a friendship and tore the original band apart. From Simmons' point of view, the main issue was Frehley's and alcohol abuse. He claims this behavior got Frehley fired from the band on multiple occasions. Ultimately, Simmons felt he couldn't rely on Frehley to perform consistently, night after night. He later expressed regret, saying he should have been tougher on Ace about his substance abuse, which he believes caused the guitarist to waste his incredible talent. But it wasn't just the substance abuse. Simmons also attacked Frehley's work ethic. He flat out called him lazy, claiming Ace's natural talent was completely wasted by a lack of effort. He points to the recording of the album Music from the Elder, where Frehley literally mailed in his parts, recording them from home. At one point, Simmons even compared Frehley to a cancer that needed to be removed. In an infamous interview with Radio.com, Simmons didn't hold back and said, "When you have cancer in your system, it's best to cut it out as fast as you can. It used to be a part of your body, then it turned into cancer, so you gotta cut it out." Simmons later tried to walk back the comment, but for everyone listening, this was a deeply personal attack. While he later tried to explain his words, many saw this as a direct attack on Frehley. When Frehley threatened to share damaging information about Simmons, Simmons largely ignored him, indicating he would not back down. Frehley, for his part, claimed he quit the band twice and was not fired. He claimed Simmons and Paul Stanley were too controlling and hard to work with. Frehley also made serious accusations, alleging that Simmons had acted improperly towards his wife and labeling him a addict. He believes Simmons' public comments about his use hurt his career and cost him a lot of money. This feud has remained public even after Kiss concluded their farewell tour. At number 6 on our list is former Kiss guitarist Vinnie Vincent. Gene Simmons has been very public about his dislike for Vincent for years. This toxic relationship stems from a mix of professional disputes, Vincent's own behavior, and the numerous lawsuits he filed against the band. And while Simmons admits Vincent is talented, he calls him self-destructive and impossible to work with. Simmons has said he refuses to work with losers who make crazy demands but lack a professional work ethic. He points to Vincent's misconduct as the main reason he was fired from the band multiple times. A core issue was that Vincent never signed an official contract, leading to constant disputes over his employment status, his pay, and his songwriting credits.
Vinnie Vincent was fired following the Lick It Up tour, due in part to excessive guitar soloing at a 1984 concert in Quebec.
Well, he was let go because he never, to this day, ever signed his contract.
Oh, he was let go because he didn't want to sign a contract?
Well, he kept renegotiating, and we said this is simply an offer for employment, and there's no negotiation.
Gotcha.
Do you want the job or not? Oh yeah, I promise I'll pull out. And it just kept going and going, and we did tours. We couldn't insure him, so eventually we just let him go.
Okay. Was excessive soloing ever an issue?
Sure.
Simmons and Paul Stanley also felt Vincent's guitar playing style did not fit Kiss's sound. On stage, his guitar solos often ran so long that Simmons and Stanley had to physically stop him. Eventually, their professional disputes spilled into the courtroom, making a bad relationship even worse. Vincent sued Kiss many times for money he said he was owed for songs. According to Simmons, Vincent sued the band 14 times and lost every single case, ultimately costing him everything. Simmons has often said that Vincent is someone who ruins his own chances. He believes Vincent has a failure mechanism, which makes people mess up their own success. Simmons has said Vincent is a great guy and very talented, but he is his own worst enemy. Because of all these issues, Simmons said it was out of the question for Vincent to join Kiss on their last tour. Coming in at number 5 is a true guitar legend, Carlos Santana. Now, the conflict between Simmons and Santana isn't personal. It's a fundamental disagreement over what rock and roll should be. Santana thinks music skill is most important. Simmons believes a great show needs costumes, makeup, and big performances. The problem started in 2005 when Santana criticized Kiss and Simmons. Santana said Simmons was an entertainer, not a musician. He called Kiss Las Vegas entertainment, meaning they were more like a fun show than serious music. Santana also said that a musician doesn't need the mask and the mascara. He thought Simmons used costumes and makeup to hide his lack of music skills. At first, Simmons responded nicely, saying, "Not everyone likes the same meal." But 4 years later, in 2009, that calm was gone. Simmons decided it was time to fight back publicly. Simmons attacked Santana's stage presence. He fired back, saying he was sick and tired of these bands like Carlos Santana looking at his shoes and thinking that's a rock concert. For Simmons, a rock show should be exciting and big, not quiet and simple like Santana's style. Simmons even went so far as to tell Santana to get off the stage, declaring his performance wasn't good enough for the fans. The real problem is that they have completely different ideas about rock music. Santana believes that being a great musician and playing well is what matters most. For him, the costumes and spectacle of Kiss are just a distraction from what really matters. Simmons believes that entertainment and exciting shows are just as important as the music. He and Paul Stanley founded Kiss specifically because they felt rock shows in the 70s had become boring. Their mission was to bring explosive energy and a larger-than-life spectacle back to the stage. Coming in at number 4 is the one and only Prince. This feud exploded in May 2016 when Gene Simmons made shocking comments just weeks after the music icon's tragic death. While Simmons said Prince was very talented, his words about how Prince died were seen as mean and disrespectful. During a Newsweek interview, Simmons claimed Prince was a better musician than Michael Jackson. But then he talked about how Prince died. Simmons said, "How pathetic that he killed himself." He later clarified he didn't mean Prince intentionally took his own life. Instead, he argued that Prince's use of and alcohol was the direct cause of his death. Simmons then drew a comparison between Prince's death and David Bowie's. Bowie had died a few months earlier from cancer. Simmons called Bowie's death real sickness and said it was truly sad, but he said the deaths of Prince and Michael Jackson were a choice because they used. Simmons tried to explain his harsh words. He claimed he's never been drunk or used in his life. His family's past problems with made him strongly against.
I've never used or alcohol, which is why I can put my hand in front of my face and it doesn't do that. So,
Despite his explanation, the comment sparked outrage among fans, critics, and even his own Kiss bandmate Paul Stanley. Paul Stanley was upset with Simmons. He wrote on Twitter that he was embarrassed by cold, clueless statements on Prince's death. This showed that even his own bandmate thought Simmons went too far. After all the criticism, Simmons said he was sorry. He wrote an apology on Twitter. He said he gets angry at people who use drugs because of his own experiences. He also said he didn't express himself properly. This situation shows how Simmons' strong feelings about sometimes lead him to say things that hurt people, especially when talking about musicians who have died. Coming in at number 3 is Nikki Sixx. The feud between Gene Simmons and Nikki Sixx ignited over 2 separate instances where Simmons made deeply insensitive comments on serious subjects. The conflict got worse in 2016 when Sixx directly attacked Simmons and questioned his place in the rock music world. The first incident erupted in 2014 after Simmons made callous remarks about depression and suicide. In an interview, he showed a shocking lack of empathy for people struggling with mental health. He controversially stated that if a young person claims to be depressed, they should just end their own life. Sixx, who has dealt with depression and problems, got very angry. He publicly condemned Simmons on his radio show and across social media. Sixx pointed out how harmful these words could be to young fans who struggle with mental health. He made it personal, stating that if he had followed that advice years ago, his 4 children wouldn't exist today. Following widespread backlash, which even led to radio stations pulling Kiss songs from the air, Simmons eventually issued an apology. 2 years later, Simmons caused more trouble after Prince died. He called Prince's death pathetic and said Prince killed himself slowly by using drugs. This time, Sixx's response was much more personal and harsh. He called Simmons an overrated lucky guy that dresses like a clown and a narrow-minded bullying person. Sixx said, "Gene Simmons, you're no longer my hero." The backlash even drew in Kiss's own Paul Stanley. He said on Twitter that he was embarrassed by Simmons' comments. Stanley, while defending Simmons, told Sixx he should move on. Sixx fired back, accusing Stanley of trying to protect a bully. But it was the Prince incident that seemed to permanently cement the bad blood between Simmons and Sixx. Although Sixx later admitted they looked like a bunch of old women fighting, the damage was already done. Taking the number 2 spot is Nirvana's iconic frontman, Kurt Cobain. Gene Simmons has also made controversial statements about Kurt Cobain, sparking significant outrage. Now, this isn't a personal feud like his clashes with other musicians. Instead, it stems from a fundamental disagreement over the very definition of a rock icon. The controversy began in 2013, when Simmons argued that modern artists like Kurt Cobain and Amy Winehouse couldn't be considered true icons. His reasoning? They only released a handful of albums, which he claimed wasn't enough to earn that title. Simmons bluntly asked, "What? Just because you die, that makes you an icon?" No. He compared them to his list of real icons like Elvis Presley, the Beatles, and Led Zeppelin. These comments made many people angry. Critics said Simmons was cold and did not understand how much Cobain's music and death affected young people. More recently, however, Simmons has softened his stance on Cobain's talent. In 2024, he said he was a major fan of Nirvana, but he still argued that Nirvana still couldn't be placed on the same level as a band like the Beatles. He said the Beatles had a bigger impact on culture. Simmons gave an example of asking a 20-year-old person on the street to name Nirvana members or songs. He said fewer people would know the answers compared to Beatles questions. While these recent comments weren't as harsh as his 2013 remarks, they still reveal Simmons' core mindset. He defines greatness through longevity and widespread recognition. He believes that being great means having a long career and being known by everyone. Many fans and critics disagree with this view when talking about artists like Cobain, who died young. Many fans and critics reject this perspective, especially when discussing artists like Cobain, who died at their peak. The fundamental divide lies in their philosophies about rock music itself. Simmons judges artists like a business person, focusing on long-term success and many albums. Other people think Cobain's legacy comes from the strong, immediate impact his music had and how it changed culture. This clash highlights 2 completely different standards for measuring true greatness in rock history. Taking the number 1 spot is Peter Criss, and here's why. Gene Simmons and Peter Criss have had one of the most toxic relationships in Kiss history. Their problems come from personal fights, and alcohol issues, and business disagreements. These issues resulted in Criss leaving the band multiple times and decades of public insults between them. Criss's biggest downfall was his struggle with and alcohol. This made him act strangely and unable to perform well. In 2024, Simmons stated that both Chris and Ace Frehley were in and out of the band 3 different times for the same old thing. He was, of course, referring to their battles with and alcohol. Simmons claimed that by the time Chris first left, his made him so unreliable that he couldn't play the drums anymore. The other members were left with no choice but to vote him out. Simmons and Paul Stanley also got frustrated with Chris's declining drumming skills. Simmons said Chris's drumming style used to be good, but it became inconsistent. Chris would play different patterns and sometimes forgot which song the band was playing. According to Simmons, by the time they made the Dynasty and Unmasked albums, Chris's drumming was so bad that other musicians had to record his parts. At times, the tension even boiled over into violence. In Peter Criss's 2012 book, he described an incident during a 1979 tour where he went after Simmons with a broken champagne bottle. Crew members had to physically restrain him before he could reach Simmons. But Criss's book also tells his side of the story. In it, he labels Simmons a greedy Hollywood madman. Chris also expressed deep hurt over the lack of support from his former bandmates during personal crises. He pointed out that when he was diagnosed with male breast cancer, Gene didn't call. Paul didn't call. As recently as 2025, Simmons referred to Chris as a black cloud that hung over the band, citing his substance abuse and difficult behavior. This ongoing conflict shows how personal problems and different approaches to music can destroy longtime friendships in rock bands. And that wraps up our long list of 9 artists Gene Simmons has publicly feuded with throughout his career. From bitter disputes with his own Kiss bandmates to fundamental disagreements about the very soul of rock and roll, these conflicts reveal the many complex sides of one of rock's most outspoken figures. Whether you agree with Simmons or think he went too far, these feuds reveal the passion and strong opinions that drive the rock music world. Some fights were about money and contracts, others were about and personal problems. What do you think about Gene Simmons and these conflicts? Do you believe he was right to speak out, or did he cross the line? Which feud surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed learning about these rock music battles, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We have more videos coming about rock feuds, band breakups, and music industry drama.